And she was in a part of town where she never frequents, but she had some random people come in to see her internationally, and they're like, hey, let's go to one more place. So it was truly like a happy accident.
She turned him down twice. He was already famous, but she didn't care. She just kept serving tables and saving money for college. Years later, they ended up married with kids, and he still carries a photo from the day they met. But that's just one story. From the engineer who refused to quit her job to the farm girl from Canada, these women didn't chase fame. They built quiet lives with men the world couldn't stop watching. And somehow, those marriages lasted longer than anyone expected. Hollywood didn't see it coming. Matt Damon was in Miami, filming Stuck on You, when everything changed. It was April 2003. He ducked into a nightclub called Crowbar to escape a growing crowd of fans who wanted selfies and autographs. The place was loud, drinks were flowing, and Luciana Barroso was behind the bar, focused on her shift like she had done countless nights before. She wasn't thinking about celebrities, and certainly not expecting one to step behind the bar with her. But that's what Damon did. He wasn't just hiding. He started mixing drinks. Years earlier, he had trained as a bartender for a movie role, and now he was pouring shots and shaking cocktails in a real club, helping Luciana earn more in tips than she usually did in a week. Everyone wanted to be served by Jason Bourne, and Luciana? She just kept working, quietly noticing the contrast between the Hollywood actor and the down-to-earth man who didn't mind getting his hands dirty. Luciana wasn't just a bartender. She was a single mom, raising her 4-year-old daughter Alexia on her own, living a life that didn't include red carpets or private jets. That didn't scare Damon. It intrigued him. When she told him she couldn't just pack up and run off somewhere because of her daughter, he didn't walk away. He leaned in. He later admitted that was part of what made him fall for her. It wasn't glamorous, it was real. Their relationship didn't play out in the spotlight. They quietly dated for 2 years. No paparazzi-chased proposals or magazine covers announcing an engagement. In December 2005, they got married in a small civil ceremony at Manhattan City Hall. No fanfare, just a couple who knew what they wanted. At that point, Damon was already one of Hollywood's highest-paid actors, earning $20–30 million per film, while Luciana had been making around $30,000 a year. But none of that seemed to matter. They built a life together that was measured not in headlines, but in commitment. They now have 3 daughters together: Isabella in 2006, Gia in 2008, and Stella in 2010. Damon also legally adopted Alexia, and despite a net worth estimated at $170 million, Damon always credits Luciana with keeping him grounded. He said she saved him from the path so many in Hollywood go down, the one filled with ego, excess, and emptiness. Christian Bale. Christian Bale didn't believe in marriage at first. His parents had divorced when he was 17, after nearly 2 decades together. And so, Bale grew up thinking long-term love wasn't real. He carried that with him into adulthood, convinced marriage just wasn't for him. Then, in 1999, something shifted. Her name was Cibi, a Serbian-American woman born in Chicago, whose real name was Srboslava. She wasn't an actress or a model trying to break into Hollywood, though she had done both. She stood 5 feet 11 inches tall, had appeared in Kevin Aucoin's iconic makeup book, Face Forward, and later worked behind the scenes, assisting producer Jordan Kerner on movies like George of the Jungle. She eventually became personal assistant to Winona Ryder, who was co-starring with Bale in Little Women. That's where the connection began. A barbecue in the late 1990s led to conversations, which turned into something more. Within a year, Bale, the man who swore off marriage, was flying to Las Vegas to elope with Cibi. It was January 29, 2000, just a day before his 26th birthday. The ceremony was led by an Elvis impersonator. No rings of paparazzi, no designer tuxes or rented ballrooms. Just two people who decided not to overthink it. Cibi didn't disappear into the background of Bale's career. She moved into the action, literally. Over the years, she developed a surprising side career as a stunt driver. When Bale was filming The Dark Knight Rises, she drove one of the cop cars in the chase scenes. She did it again in Ford v Ferrari, pulling off high-speed stunts most actors wouldn't dare attempt. Bale once admitted that her driving actually scared him. She wasn't pretending. She was really doing it. And she was really good. They've kept a low profile for over 2 decades. Their daughter Evelyn, nicknamed Luca, was born in March 2005. Their son Joseph came in 2014. For 25 years, they've quietly stayed together while Hollywood couples all around them broke up, made up, and split again. Bale never gave flashy quotes about their relationship, but when he does talk about Cibi, there's always a kind of awe in his voice. Not because she's famous, but because she's fearless. And because somewhere along the way, the man who didn't believe in marriage found someone who made him stop questioning it altogether. Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges wasn't looking for love when he arrived in Paradise Valley, Montana in 1975 to shoot the film Rancho Deluxe. But something shifted the moment he looked across the room and saw a young waitress. She was 21, beautiful, and bruised. 2 black eyes and a broken nose from a car accident didn't take away from her presence. In fact, it made her unforgettable. Jeff couldn't stop looking at her. Something about the mix of beauty and vulnerability just stuck. That waitress was Susan Geston. She was saving up for college and working long shifts at Chico Hot Springs. Jeff finally walked up and asked her out. Not once, but twice. Both times, she turned him down. All she said was, "No, it's a small town. Maybe we'll run into each other later." He was disappointed, but then came the wrap party. They danced. That changed everything. Even as he was falling for her, Jeff was scared. Not of her, but of what it meant. He admitted later that he was afraid of marriage. He saw it as something heavy, maybe even like giving up his freedom. But their connection kept growing. On their first real date, they ended up looking at a house with a real estate agent. Suddenly, something in Jeff's head whispered, "You're looking at a house with your future wife." That thought freaked him out more than it thrilled him. He wasn't ready. They moved in together but didn't rush into anything. Then Susan made it clear. She wanted marriage and a family. That's when Jeff made the leap. They got married in 1977 and went on to have 3 daughters, Isabel, born August 6, 1981, then Jessica and Haley. Life was steady, warm, and real. Decades later, everything was tested. In 2020, while filming The Old Man, Jeff found out he had a 9 by 12-inch cancerous tumor in his abdomen. As if that wasn't enough, both he and Susan caught COVID during his chemotherapy. She spent 5 days in the hospital. He was there for 5 weeks. He couldn't stand for more than 45 seconds without collapsing. He later said cancer wasn't as bad as COVID. That's how close he came to dying. Through it all, Susan stayed by his side. She fought doctors to keep him off a ventilator when it looked hopeless. She pushed for him, protected him, and he knew it. Slowly, things got better. The tumor shrank down from the size of a foot-long sandwich to something as small as a marble. And in August 2021, Jeff walked Haley down the aisle. 10 years into their marriage, a makeup artist from Rancho Deluxe sent Jeff some old photos from the Montana shoot. One was from the very day he met Susan. That photo still lives in his wallet. He carries it like a quiet reminder of the exact moment everything began. Patrick Dempsey. Patrick Dempsey's story starts a little differently. In 1994, his name showed up in the appointment book at a salon called Deluxe in Los Angeles. Jillian Fink, who owned the place, thought it was a prank. Her staff used to joke around and write fake celebrity names down for fun. But then, Patrick actually walked in, and Jillian was stunned and a little delighted. She didn't gush over him, though. Jillian was already doing well on her own. She was one of the top hairstylists and makeup artists in LA, with real talent and a serious client list. When Patrick sat down for a haircut, they were both seeing other people. So, for 3 whole years, their connection stayed strictly professional. Still, Patrick noticed something. She'd flirt, smile a certain way, and he liked it. He later said those appointments became something he looked forward to. Then, in 1997, both were finally single. He didn't waste time. He asked her out. For their first date, he cooked her pasta at home. No red carpet, no fancy dinner, just a quiet night and good food. 2 years later, on July 31st, 1999, they got married at his family's farmhouse in Lewiston, Maine. It was a small wedding, the kind that felt like home. Over time, they had 3 kids, Tallulah, born in 2002, and twin boys, Darby and Sullivan, born in 2007. Jillian kept working. She never used Patrick's name to boost her career. She earned her reputation the same way she always had, by being really good at what she did. Then, in 2015, something unexpected happened. Jillian filed for divorce. They'd been married 15 years. Everyone thought they were solid. But it wasn't over. Patrick didn't want to let go. He told the press he wanted to fight for it. And he did. They took their time, worked through it, and in November 2016, they officially called off the divorce. Today, it's been more than 28 years since Patrick walked into that salon. Vince Vaughn. Vince Vaughn had built a career on playing smooth-talking bachelors, the kind of guy who could charm a room and escape commitment in one breath. But in real life, his story took a different turn, and it started in the most unexpected place, with a Canadian farm girl named Kyla Weber. She wasn't part of the Hollywood machine. She grew up in Blackie, Alberta, a town with fewer than 400 people, where farm life was normal and quiet. She later moved to Calgary and sold homes as a residential real estate agent. The contrast between her world and Vince's $70 million lifestyle couldn't have been more different. But sometimes, that's exactly what makes things click. They met in Los Angeles in 2008 at a wedding. She was a childhood friend of the bride, and Vince almost didn't go near her. He said he was terrified to date her because if things went bad, it could get really awkward with his close friends. But he couldn't help himself. She was different. He had just come off a high-profile breakup with Jennifer Aniston, a relationship that had been picked apart by tabloids. Kyla was the opposite, private, grounded, and far away from the noise. He once said, "She's a civilian," which is good, and you could tell he meant it. While she stayed in Calgary, still working in real estate for a company called Coco Homes, they kept in touch through emails and phone calls. That long-distance stretch didn't slow things down. On Valentine's Day in 2009, Vince proposed, admitting later that he picked the date so he'd never forget the anniversary. They got married on January 2nd, 2010, at Lake Forest Academy just outside of Chicago. It was a quiet ceremony with only about 60 people there. Vince was 39. Kyla was 31. It marked a big shift for Vince, who had once lived in a $12 million bachelor pad in Chicago's Palmolive building, the same apartment Hugh Hefner used to own. For Kyla, the move from Alberta to Los Angeles was a leap. She had never lived in the U.S., never dealt with Hollywood press. When a Canadian newspaper called her after the wedding, she politely declined to speak, saying, "I'd rather not take the call." but thanks for calling. Bye-bye. She didn't need the attention. They had their first child, a daughter named Lachlan Kyla Vaughn, on December 18, 2010. Then a son, Vernon Lindsay Vaughn, on August 7, 2013. Vince later said Kyla was the first person who made him really want kids. That kind of shift doesn't happen unless it's real. In August 2024, the whole family showed up publicly at Vince's Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony. Vince, now 54, thanked his beautiful wife and told their kids they meant everything to him. Kyla, still private and still out of the spotlight, has kept working in real estate and reportedly has a net worth of about $3 million. She's managed to support Vince's Hollywood life while staying completely herself. No red carpets, no headlines, just a quiet, steady presence in a very loud world. John Cena's story starts differently, but ends in a similar place. On February 3, 2019, during Super Bowl Lurches, he was in a Vancouver sports bar, filming a movie called Playing with Fire, when Shay walked in with a group of friends. One of them asked Cena for a photo, then brought Shay over for her turn. That moment turned into everything. Shay wasn't part of the entertainment world at all. She was born in Iran, raised in Canada, and studied engineering at the University of British Columbia. She loved math and physics growing up, inspired by her brother's school projects. One day, he showed her an autonomous car he'd built, and from that point on, she knew what she wanted to do. After college, she became a product manager at Motorola Solutions and later worked at Sonatype, where she helped manage engineering teams and complex software. Cena was 41 when they met, and he didn't wait. He got her number that night, and by the weekend, they were on their first date. Things moved quickly. They were seen together in public by March 2019, and on Valentine's Day 2020, he proposed at home. He later said he had the ring in his pocket and figured he couldn't wait any longer. They got married privately on October 12, 2020, in Tampa, Florida, with only a few guests. Then, 2 years later, they held a bigger ceremony in Vancouver to honor Shay's background and family. Unlike many people who step away from their careers after marrying a celebrity, Shay kept working in tech. She didn't drop her job. She didn't chase headlines. She built a life with Cena while keeping her own, and in the process, became part of a rare kind of love story in the spotlight. One that actually works because it doesn't try to be loud. Stephen Colbert. Stephen Colbert didn't know that a quick visit to an opera with his mother would change the rest of his life. It was 1990. He had come to the Spoleto Festival in Charleston, but not just for fun. His then-girlfriend had given him a serious choice, either commit or walk away. That trip was supposed to help him decide. But when he stood in the theater lobby, he saw a woman he'd never seen before, and something clicked. A voice in his head said, "Her. That's your wife." That woman was Evelyn McGee. But here's where the real surprise begins. They had actually crossed paths before, multiple times, and they didn't like each other at all. Stephen once called her a frost queen when he was interviewed years later, saying their college chat lasted barely 30 seconds because he was out of it, and she seemed too distant. But somehow, when he saw her again at Spoleto, everything was different. She was standing there, and he just knew. That quiet moment in the theater would end up rewriting both their lives. Evelyn wasn't just a random face in the crowd. She came from one of Charleston's most respected families. Her father, Joseph Halstead McGee Jr., was a civil litigator and once served in the South Carolina House of Representatives. Evelyn had grown up only 2 blocks from Stephen, but they'd never really connected. Until that night. 3 years later, on October 9, 1993, they got married. Back then, Stephen wasn't famous. He was just beginning. But the foundation they built was strong and steady. They raised 3 kids, Madeline, Peter, and John, and Evelyn carved out her own path too. She became vice president at Spartina Productions and led the board of trustees at the Montclair Film Festival. Their bond was tested like never before during the pandemic. For 460 days straight, Stephen hosted The Late Show from their home, without a live audience, without the big studio lights. Evelyn sat across from him every night, laughing at his jokes, giving him the energy he needed to keep going. Later, he said that if he could ever make an audience laugh the way she does, he'd be just fine. And when he returned to the Ed Sullivan Theater on June 14, 2021, he looked into the camera and called her the greatest audience of all time. In 2024, they co-wrote a book called Does This Taste Funny? And it debuted at number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list. After 32 years of marriage, they still laugh together, still create together, and still look like they never forgot that moment in the theater lobby when everything quietly shifted. Eddie Redmayne. Eddie Redmayne was just 15 and studying at Eton College, the same place where Prince William went to school. Hannah Bagshaw, who attended a nearby all-girls boarding school, helped organize a charity fashion show. They needed male models. Eddie said yes. So there he was, shirtless, walking the runway as a teenage boy. That's how he first met Hannah. They stayed friends for 12 long years after that, never crossing the line. Just 2 people in each other's orbit. It wasn't until 2012, more than a decade later, that something shifted. Eddie was about to start filming Les Miserables. They went on what he later described as a sort of date. At one point, he suddenly asked, "You don't want to come to Florence with me next week, do you?" Hannah thought he was joking. "That's absurd," she said. But he wasn't. And that's how their real journey began. Spontaneous, unexpected, and very real. By December that year, they appeared together on the red carpet at the Les Miserables premiere in London. He proposed in 2014 during Memorial Day weekend, and even went the traditional route, asking Hannah's father for permission. The engagement was printed in the Times, and it felt like a classic love letter dressed as a newspaper announcement. They got married on December 15, 2014, at exactly 5:30 p.m. The wedding took place at Babington House in Somerset, England, a beautiful spot known for hosting celebrity weddings. Eddie had one specific request. He wanted to sing "In the Bleak Midwinter" at his own wedding, and he did. The whole day was designed around warmth, winter candles, and soft elegance. They now have 2 children. Their daughter Iris was born on June 15, 2016. Their son Luke arrived on March 10, 2018. Despite Eddie's fame, Hannah stayed grounded. She kept working as a PR executive in finance, quietly building a private life, while the cameras stayed focused on her husband. But behind the scenes, their balance never shifted. They still kept it all simple. No headlines, no chaos, just 2 people who waited patiently until the timing was finally right. Pierce Brosnan. Pierce Brosnan wasn't expecting anything that day. It was April 8, 1994, and he was on a beach in Cabo San Lucas, still carrying the quiet weight of losing his wife Cassandra Harris to cancer 3 years earlier. She'd been only 43. They had shared a life filled with love, and her long battle, 4 years, 8 surgeries, constant chemotherapy, had ended too soon. After her death, Pierce had 3 children to care for. One was their son, Sean. The other 2, Charlotte and Christopher, were Cassandra's from her previous marriage. But Pierce had adopted them back in 1986, after their father died. He was doing his best to keep going. He wasn't searching for anything. But then, at a party, something unexpected happened. Keely Shay Smith, had been sent to interview Ted Danson for NBC. But Danson got called away, and that's when she met Pierce. She later said he had this sparkle in his eye and looked exactly like someone you'd just naturally be drawn to. She was impressed right away. So was he. Keely was no stranger to big moments. Born in 1963 in Vallejo, California, she'd already worked with NBC, ABC, and CBS. She had appeared on Good Morning America, Entertainment Tonight, and even covered environmental issues before it was trendy. When she was a child, she'd helped protect a wetland in Southern California. That passion never left her. Years later, in 2016, she directed a documentary that showed the impact of pesticides in Hawaii. The film won 11 awards and screened at 20 film festivals. But back in Mexico, none of that mattered. They went on their first date a few nights later, the evening sky lit up with fireworks. They stayed out talking until 3 a.m., holding hands like teenagers. Pierce later said he didn't think he could ever find someone like Keely, not even if he searched 1,000,000 times. She didn't just bring him love, she brought him back to life. They were together for 7 years before they decided to marry. During that time, their first son Dylan was born in 1997, but their wedding plans kept getting delayed. Once because of floods, another time because Pierce's son Sean had a bad car accident, and finally because Keely became pregnant again with their second son, Paris. Eventually, on August 4, 2001, they got married in Ireland at Ballintubber Abbey, a church that stood for over 800 years. Pierce arrived in a car with license plates that read ZOM07. The security was tight, the windows were covered, and Keely wore a pearl-detailed gown inspired by Princess Grace Kelly's wedding dress. A single piper played as she walked down the aisle. The reception happened at Ashford Castle, with a massive 7-tier cake, an ice sculpture of Rodin's The Kiss, and a fireworks show that lit up the Irish sky. Now, decades later, they're still together. Pierce recently said that Keely still makes his heart sing, and that the years have gone by in a blink. When people online made cruel remarks about Keely's weight, Pierce didn't stay quiet. He stood by her, saying he loved her just as she is, and always would. Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart's story started with a burrito and a misunderstanding. In 1995, a roommate of Tracy McShane introduced them. Jon was already working on a film called Wishful Thinking, and the blind date seemed like a good idea at the time. But when they sat down at a Mexican restaurant, Tracy barely touched her food. Jon thought she wasn't interested, and did the only thing he could think of. He nervously ate both his own burrito and hers. Later, he called it one of the most embarrassing moments of his life. But then, they went to a bar, took a couple of shots, and everything changed. Tracy opened up, and suddenly Jon saw who she really was. She was smart, grounded, and cared deeply about animals. At the time, Jon had custody of 2 cats from a previous relationship. Tracy, even though allergic to cats, was determined to bond with them. For her, the way he took care of those cats said everything she needed to know about who he was. She called him her dream man. Tracy had a different kind of life. She was a veterinary technician, and she loved it. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave her a deep sense of purpose. Her work with animals wasn't just a job, it was a calling, and it showed Jon that her heart was real. When it came time to propose, Jon didn't do it the usual way. He reached out to Will Shortz, the crossword editor at the New York Times, and asked for help. Together, they created a custom puzzle with clues that would lead to the big question. Tracy solved it, of course. Crosswords were something they loved doing together. He said it was the perfect reminder that he was marrying a brilliant woman. In 2000, they both changed their last names to Stewart. Jon had been born Jonathan Stewart Leibowitz. It was a small way of showing they were starting a new chapter, together. They wanted kids, but faced challenges. IVF was tough, but they got through it with humor. Jon would dress up their pets in silly costumes just to make Tracy laugh during her injections. Eventually, they had their son Nathan in 2004 and daughter Maggie in 2006. After Jon left The Daily Show in 2015, they bought a 45-acre farm in Colts Neck, New Jersey, for around $4 million. It was originally built in the 1770s. They turned it into Hockhokson Farm, a rescue sanctuary for animals that would have otherwise been slaughtered. The place has 6 barns, 16 stalls, 5 pastures, and even a pond. They grow sustainable feed and open the place up for school tours. The sanctuary runs under their nonprofit, the Hey Friend Foundation.